Hey everyone, my name's Jeff. Some of you may know me from my old channel, INTJ Equation, then went to Trauma Type, but now I am transitioning again to astrology, evolutionary astrology. I've been doing birth chart readings for free just to get some practice, but I hope to keep these videos up to explain for paying clients as well. Astrology is really complicated, and one big complaint that I got is that I'm not explaining the basics enough, but I guess that there be explaining the basics for hours and hours and hours, and it takes something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of study to really understand and master. So I'm going to make a video series on the basics of astrology, so you can come and watch this. And if you are a paying customer, or I am reading your birth chart for free, that will give you the opportunity for us to explore your birth chart personally and how these energies affect you, instead of me giving the basics pretty much. So all right, so I study evolutionary astrology. What's evolutionary astrology? It's more of a modern type of astrology. We can go back and look at traditional astrology and modern astrology. Traditional astrology is obviously what the ancients practiced. It's a little more rigid and stringent, in my opinion. I don't know a ton about it. I did look into it a little bit here and there, but I do focus on modern Western astrology. That was obviously before the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So a lot of things like rulership and things like that are different. But we're going to focus on evolutionary astrology here. Evolutionary astrology is pretty much kind of a look into our soul and our karma. It kind of focuses on past lives and where we're coming from and where we need to go. I think the heart and soul of evolutionary astrology is Pluto right here, and not to mention the north node and the south node of the moon. So we'll get into this a little bit more, but Pluto's kind of like, there was an astrologer named Jeffrey Wolf Green who was really big on Pluto. I haven't looked too much into his work yet, but I definitely do want to in the future. Like I said, astrology is really, really complicated and takes a lot of study. But the north and south node of the moon, so you can look at it like the south node is kind of explains our old nasty habits. If you're Christian or you're atheist or whatever, and you don't believe in reincarnation and past lives, that's fine. I am starting to lean more and more towards this theory that Stephen Forrest has, who is kind of one of the world-renowned astrologers that are out today. I am actually studying under him, not him directly, but his school, and I'm learning these concepts. But the south node of the moon pretty much represents kind of like who we were in a past life. So it's kind of like, oh, you can look at it like, if I said, if you're Christian or atheist or whatever, you can kind of look at it as habits, skills, things that we do that we're naturally good at, but is not necessarily good for our growth and development. It's like a comfort zone. It's like somewhere we stay and don't want to grow, and we kind of have these stubborn, stringent habits that are kind of holding us back. Across here, making a 180-degree aspect called the opposition, is the north node. This is kind of what feels unfamiliar. It might be kind of a blind spot. It might feel uncomfortable. We might not necessarily be good at it, but it's something that we need to practice and develop. I'm just using my chart here as an example, not to kind of pontificate myself, but so evolutionary astrology is kind of like, this is what we need to get away from, and this is what we need to strive towards. Just a quick example here. My south node is in Sagittarius in the second house. So that kind of means Sagittarius kind of represents, can represent religion, dogmatism, idealism, higher learning, education, travels over water, foreigners, foreign cultures, foreign languages, things kind of like that. So with the south node, we kind of look at it in a negative aspect. And the second house can represent resources, like basic resources for living, like shelter, food, water. It could even be like love, like you're loved and nurtured as a child. It could kind of really be anything. It's kind of seen as a house of money, and it is money, but it's more the house of resources. And of course, resource is a money. The second house could also represent your self-esteem, your self-worth, kind of like things that you value and find beautiful as well. So with the south node, it's not negative per se. That's another thing between traditional astrology and evolutionary astrology, modern astrology. Traditional astrology kind of sees things as good and bad. We kind of see things as either or. It's kind of what you make of it. Some things are maybe not as ideal and a little bit rougher, and some things maybe flow a little bit better, but it's kind of what you make of it. But the south node's kind of the exception. We kind of look at it negative. It's not always negative, but kind of generically is kind of what we do. So having the South Node in Sagittarius in the second house, what that would kind of represent is I'm over idealistic. Maybe I'm stubborn and stringent and kind of hot headed because it is a fire sign. I kind of have my own ideas and I don't like to be open and explore other people's ideas and possibilities. I kind of dismiss people as stupid, things like that. Like I kind of grew up in poverty. I could probably see that I'm overweight. So maybe I hoard resources. Food is a resource, it's essential for survival. So kind of, I don't want to like get too much in detail, but just for an example, like when I grew up, I didn't have a lot of resources and food and nurturance and stuff. So kind of maybe this cold-hearted person, which I'm trying to move away from, which is Gemini. The North Node is in Gemini in the eighth house. So like traditionally in astrology, eighth house is kind of seen as a house of death, and it's really, really negative, and it can be negative, but it's also about transformation. It's not about figurative death all the time. It could be, or it's not about literal death all the time. It can be figurative. It can be like shedding an old habit or overcoming an old trauma or obstacle that's kind of within you. The eighth house is very personal. It's like your personal unconscious. If you follow the work of Jung, which if you watched my channel before, you've probably done, what you probably are into. It's also about the house of intimacy, the house of sex, other people's resources, things like that. So this is like your personal resources, and this is other people's resources, like sharing, and this is like hoarding in a lot of ways, kind of negative, positive. And this is Gemini. It is a house of twins. It's the house of duality. It kind of goes outside of itself. It's the house of communication, both talking and listening, the house of how you express your intellect, house of research, things of investigation. What this kind of means in an evolutionary standpoint is I need to get away from kind of the self-absorbed idealism where I think that I'm always right. I don't listen to other people. I kind of hoard my resources. I kind of hoard my knowledge and go towards the North Node of sharing my resources, sharing my knowledge, trying to build intimate bonds with people, not being so closed off and stubborn, keeping an open mind and talking to people and learning about them instead of just wanting to learn about myself and how other people work and how they think and how they tick. Well, I think that's the basics for evolutionary astrology. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this series, and I'm going to go ahead and move into the planets.